We are ready for study of chapter 47 and 48 in the book of Genesis. And we learned in the prior chapter that Joseph has brought Jacob and his brothers and all of the offspring and settled them in Goshen. And Goshen is in the northern part of Egypt. However, it is called Lower Egypt. I grew up in Tennessee on the Cumberland River, and when we went to Nashville, we said that we were going up to Nashville. It had just come through the family. My great-great-grandmother had come from Nashville to live in our county, and this saying of going up to Nashville came from, in the early days, they went to Nashville by boat, and because they were traveling up the river, they said they were going up to Nashville. And one of our California friends had a difficult time understanding why we said we were going up to Nashville when we were actually traveling south and should have said we were going down to Nashville. And this is exactly the case of the Nile River in Egypt. It empties in the north part of Egypt, and that part is called Lower Egypt, up in the delta near the mouth. And that area, Goshen, was a very conducive area for shepherding and also raising herds. And it was the settlement of Asians of Middle Eastern origin, Semitic in particular, who had come into Egypt and established themselves. Joseph, if you remember from the prior chapter, took them to Goshen and had not necessarily asked Pharaoh where his people might be lodged in his country. Goshen is across the Nile from Memphis, where Joseph resided, and not in a really close proximity, but in the vicinity. Chapter 47, verse 1. Then Joseph came and told Pharaoh and said, My father and my brethren and their flocks and their herds and all that they have come out of the land of Canaan, and behold, they are in the land of Goshen. 2. And he took some of his brethren, even 5 men, and presented them unto Pharaoh. 5 is the biblical numeric symbol for grace. 3. And Pharaoh said unto his brethren, What is your occupation? And they said unto Pharaoh, Thy servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers. Now recall in the last chapter that Egyptians regarding shepherding as an abomination. They were interested in cattle and developed very fine lines of cattle through breeding, but they were not at all interested in sheep or goats. 4. They said moreover unto Pharaoh, For to sojourn in the land are we come, for thy servants have no pasture for their flocks, for the famine is sore in the land of Canaan. Now therefore we pray thee, let thy servants dwell in the land of Goshen. 5. And Pharaoh spake unto Joseph, saying, Thy father and thy brethren are come unto thee. 6. The land of Egypt is before thee, in the best of the land. Make thy father and brethren to dwell in the land of Goshen. Let them dwell, and if thou knowest any men of activity among them, make them rulers over my cattle. Once again, a great interest in Egypt in producing a superior stock of cattle. 7. And Joseph brought in Jacob his father and set him before Pharaoh, and Jacob blessed Pharaoh. And that word is in the Hebrew barak, and it likely here means a salute. 8. And Pharaoh said unto Jacob, How old art thou? 9. And Jacob said unto Pharaoh, The days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have the days of the years of my life been, and have not attained unto the days of the years of the life of my fathers in the days of their pilgrimage. Now this would have been 215 years after the promise Abraham received from God that he would be a father of many nations. At this time, Joseph himself would have been 39 years old. 10. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. 11. And Joseph placed his father and his brethren, and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses, as Pharaoh had commanded. So they are given land. They are not simply using the land, but it has been gifted to them. 12. And Joseph nourished his father and his brethren and all his father's household with bread according to their families. And that word nourished in the Hebrew is beyond merely just feeding them bread, but it implies that Joseph did everything he could to make their lives, particularly that of his father Jacob, as comfortable and as well as it could be provided. 13. And there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very sore, so that the land of Egypt and all the land of Canaan fainted by reason of the famine. So the famine has grown worse. 14. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the corn which they had bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So here is the chief officer, Joseph, and he has gone over the land and gotten all the money. 15. And when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, Give us bread, for why shouldest we die in thy presence? For the money faileth. 16. And Joseph said, Give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle if money fail. So, if you have no money, we will take your herds. 17. And they brought their cattle unto Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for horses and for the flocks. and for the cattle of the herds, and for the asses, and he fed them with bread for all their cattle for that year. Now the famine is a 7-year famine. So now the persons in the land have no money, and they no longer own their animals. This is a feudal system about to be set up. It is the beginning of a complete feudal system. 18. When that year was ended, now this will be the 7th and last year of the famine. When that year was ended, they came unto him the 2nd year, and said unto him, We will not hide it from my Lord how that our money is spent. My Lord also hath our herds of cattle. There is not aught left in the sight of my Lord, but our bodies and our lands. They have themselves and the land they own. 19. Wherefore shall we die before thine eyes, before we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants unto Pharaoh, and give us seed, that we may live and not die, that the land be not desolate. In other words, they're saying, take us, take the land. All we want is some seed, and perhaps if we plant, there will be some early and latter rain, and the crop will grow. 20. And Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh, for the Egyptians sold every man his field, because the famine prevailed over him, so the land became Pharaoh's. Now, Pharaoh is a feudal lord. He is in possession of everything: animals, money, land, and the people themselves. 21. And as for the people, he removed them to cities, and that's where the food was stored, from one end of the borders of Egypt even to the other end thereof. 22. Only the land of the priest bought he not, for the priest had a portion assigned them of Pharaoh, and did eat their portion which Pharaoh gave them, wherefore they sold not their lands. So only the priests did not give up their land in this system. 23. Then Joseph said unto the people, Behold, I have bought you this day and your land for Pharaoh. Lo, here is seed for you, and ye shall sow the land. So Pharaoh owns you, and he owns the land as well. Now, 24. And it shall come to pass in the increase that ye shall give the 5th part unto Pharaoh, and 4 parts shall be your own, for seed of the field, and for your food, and for them of your households, for food for your little ones. In other words, now the peoples are sharecroppers on what was once their own property, and they are on a 4/5, 1/5 system. They get 4/5 of the crop, and Pharaoh gets 1/5. 25. And they said, Thou hast saved our lives. Let us find grace in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants. 26. And Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt unto this day, that Pharaoh should have the 5th part, except the land of the priests only, which became not Pharaoh's. 27. And Israel dwelt. Israel is the spiritual name for Jacob, ending, as we know, with that final syllable L as part of the sacred name, for example, El Shaddai. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions therein, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. Remember that the family of Jacob started out with 70 persons, including Joseph's two sons who were born in Egypt, Ephraim and Manasseh. 28. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years, so the whole age of Jacob was 147 years. And 17 is the biblical numeric for victory. 29. And the time drew nigh that Israel must die. And he called his son Joseph, and said unto him, If now I have found grace in thy sight, put, I pray thee, thy hand under my thigh, and deal kindly and truly with me. Bury me not, I pray thee, in Egypt. His hand below the thigh is going to be a kind of promise or vow. 30. But I will lie with my fathers, and thou shalt carry me out of Egypt, and bury me in their burying place. And he said, I will do as thou hast said. And that place was the cave that Abraham bought for the burial place of Rebekah, of Sarah, and it's called Machpelah, and that is where he will be buried. And it was changed to Bethel. And he said, Swear unto me, and he sware unto him, and Israel bowed himself upon the bed's head. Now that means that he leaned toward the east. Chapter 48, 1. And it came to pass after these things that one told Joseph, Behold, thy father is sick. And he took with him his two sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. And one told Jacob and said, Behold, thy son Joseph cometh unto thee. And Israel strengthened himself and sat upon the bed. 3. And Jacob said unto Joseph, God Almighty appeared unto me at Luz, and that is the place where he lay his head on the rock, and the rock was carried with them to Egypt, and from Egypt into the Holy Land. And it was name changed to Bethel, that place where he lay his head on the rock. And it was, I think I erroneously said it, that the cave of where they were buried was changed to Bethel. That is not true. It is Luz, where he had God gave him the promise. 4. And let me point out that at the final captivity, that the sons of Zedekiah were taken, the daughters were not. And the Bible tells us that Jeremiah took those daughters to Egypt. History tells us that they were taken to Europe. One of those daughters' name was Scota, and she lived in a land that we now called Scotland. 4. And he said unto me, this is God speaking to Jacob, behold, I will make thee fruitful and multiply thee, and I will make of thee a multitude of people, and will give this land to thy seed after thee for an everlasting possession. He's recounting what was said to him by God, and that was that land in Canaan. 5. And now thy 2 sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, which were born unto thee in the land of Egypt before I came unto thee into Egypt, are mine. As Reuben and Simeon, they shall be mine. Now, Jacob is adopting in these 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim, and they will be given, their descendants will be given a full share when they get to the promised land. And because they are brothers and really grandsons, they are called the half-tribe of Ephraim and the half-tribe of Manasseh. 6. And thy issue which thou begettest after them shall be thine, and shall be called after the name of their brethren in their inheritance. 7. As for me, when I came from Padon, Rachel died by me in the land of Canaan in the way, when yet there was but a little way to come unto Ephrath, and I buried her there in the way of Ephrath. The name is Bethlehem, meaning the house of bread, and of course the birthplace of the Messiah. And Israel beheld Joseph's sons, and said, whose are these? And 9. And Joseph said unto his father, they are my sons, whom God hath given me in this place. And he said, bring them, I pray thee, unto me, and I will bless them. 10. Now the eyes of Israel were dim for age, so he could not see. And he brought them near unto them, and he kissed them and embraced them. 11. And Israel said unto Joseph, I had not thought to see thy face, and lo, God hath showed me also thy seed. All those years he had thought that Joseph had been ripped apart by a wild animal when he was a young teenager. 12. And Joseph brought them out from between his knees, and he bowed himself with his face to the earth. Total submission. 13. And Joseph took them both, Ephraim in his right hand, toward Israel's left hand, and if you think about that, their arms would have formed a cross. And Manasseh in his left hand toward Israel's right hand, and brought them near to him. Picture it, one boy's right hand toward Jacob's left hand, and the other's left hand toward Israel's right hand, forming a cross. Many centuries before that area of the world even knew about crucifixion and crosses. 14. And Israel stretched his right hand and laid it upon Ephraim's head, who was the younger, and his left hand upon Manasseh's head, guiding his hands wittingly, and Manasseh was the firstborn. 15. And he blessed Joseph and said, God, before whom my father Abraham and Isaac did walk, the God which fed me all my life long unto this day. 16. The angel which redeemed me from all evil, bless these lads, and let thy name be named on them, and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and let them grow into a multitude in the midst of the earth. 17. And when Joseph saw that his father laid his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head to Manasseh's. He had the birth order reversed. 11. 18. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. 19. And his father refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He shall become a people, and he shall also be great, but truly his younger brother shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. Now, when we studied the prophecies covering the captivities and the northern tribe, Manasseh, it is sometimes called that Ephraim, stands for those 10 tribes. There was a split that we will discover as we move further into this portion of the Old Testament. 10 tribes went to the north and said they weren't coming down to Jerusalem to worship. And Judah and Benjamin stayed in Jerusalem. Today, most people who claim to be of Jewish background are House of Judah. Paul was a Benjaminite. The 10 tribes to the north were carried away a number of years before the fall of Jerusalem. These peoples were carried away by the Assyrians. They went over the mountains, the Caucasus Mountains, and they became called Caucasians. And they settled Western Europe. And these 2 boys here, the firstborn, Manasseh, is thought to be the ancestor of persons who settled Great Britain. And Ephraim, I have this confused. And the younger brother is the USA, the persons who settled the USA. Ephraim, Britain, Manasseh, the United States of America. And this prediction here by Jacob, that he whose seed shall become a multitude of nations, has certainly borne out. 20. And he blessed them that day, saying, In thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. Let me point out that the United States is the largest Christian nation, that the first Bible that was for people to read was British Isles, and was a descendant of Scotta, James I. 1611, the King James Version of the Bible, put into the English language the first time that a Bible had been available for the masses to read so that they did not have to be read to and told what it meant. 21. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God shall be with you, and bring you again unto the land of your fathers. 22. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the hand of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow. So now he has given Manasseh and Ephraim an inheritance that they will claim, their descendants will claim after the Exodus into the Promised Land. We have 2 more chapters in Genesis, and we will see why that the peoples were set up to come into slavery. And it is thought, let me point this out, that the Pharaoh who was serving when Joseph rose to power in Egypt was one of the Hyksos, foreign kings. And these were, as Josephus calls them, the shepherd kings. And those Asians, those Middle Easterns, those Semitic people who came into Lower Egypt managed to have a control of most of Egypt. There was a contingent in the southern part of the land, but this dynasty is called the Hyksos dynasty. And historians and biblical scholars believe that these were shepherd kings ruling as pharaohs out of those peoples during Joseph's rise to power and up until they were displaced and God's people came into subjugation as slaves making bricks. And we will learn that in the final 2 chapters. The great book of Genesis, chapters 47 and 48.